the opening of NBA free agency. It's going to be wild. It's going to be fast. I think it's going to be, fun because the draft, I don't know, was it a dud? There was a lot of trades, but nothing major happened. Mitch Lawrence joins us here from Forbes, Sporting News, Sirius XM Radio. He's all over the NBA map, and he's with us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. And Mitch, I thought the draft, it had a lot of action, but nothing really major, right? I mean, there wasn't a big signature trade or move on draft night.
Well, the trades were, the Rose trade here in New York and the Teague trade for Indiana. But, I mean, in terms of the draft, there'd be a lot more suspense if you knew who these guys were. And I'm not just talking about the international players, but when a guy like the Chris kid from Washington gets drafted, I have no idea who he is. I think the NBA, really, the league itself wants to increase that age limit, and the union has to take a look at it because the draft would have a lot more suspense if you knew who the guys were. As it turns out, it's free agency now that's kind of surpassed the draft in terms of the excitement and the drama, right?
I actually agree. In fact, on my show the next day, I think the NBA might be better served to go back to like 5 to 7 rounds and have NBDL teams and put these kids so they have control over them. Instead, they're taking guys because they have no intention of putting them on their roster.
Well, a lot of guys who get drafted overseas, of course, are the draft and stash guys. But, when you're coming from major colleges, you only play 1 year. I mean, it's not just the fans don't know them. The teams don't really know these guys either. After the first couple of picks this year, from Boston at 3 on down, teams really had, it was all guesswork. So we'll see how it works out. I'm just glad we're turning to free agency because there are some real big fish out here, including, Kevin Durant to start with, and it'll be intriguing to see what he does.
Let's start with him. There's so much Miami, Oklahoma City's obviously in play, the Clippers. What else do we know about Kevin Durant? Golden State, obviously. What else do we know about Kevin Durant, and what's the gut feeling on him? I mean, he's got to stay with Oklahoma City, right?
Well, the way it ended, losing Game 6, the way he and Westbrook collapsed down the stretch, and in Game 7, I don't think Durant gave a good account of himself. He almost has to stay there. There's a lot of unfinished business in Oklahoma City, and he loves Oklahoma City. He loves being a big fish in a small pond. But what we do know is that he's going to entertain, he's going to have meetings with 5 other teams, 2 teams in the East, Boston and Miami. I give Miami a bigger shot than Boston because, Pat Riley has a track record of getting a guy like a LeBron James, which is going to impress, I'm sure, Kevin Durant. The question there is what Pat could surround Durant with, and I don't even know if Pat Riley knows that. And you have the 3 teams out west. You have the Clippers. This, for Laker fans, has to be another bad sign that the Lakers have fallen behind the Clippers. But the Clippers will get a meeting along with San Antonio and Golden State. And I think most people in the league, both GMs and observers, think that it's going to be he'll probably Durant stay in Oklahoma City, or if there's a team he'll leave for, and that's Golden State. And what a great move that would be for the Warriors because we saw in the last 4 or 5 minutes of Game 7, they had nobody who could make a shot. And it's weird to say this, but a 73-win team needs a player, and they needed Kevin Durant.
That is pretty wild to say. Let me just, you mentioned the big fish is Durant, but LeBron, percentage chance at all that he leaves Cleveland? None, right?
Well, he said at the parade he's staying. He's not leaving, and I don't expect him to leave. First of all, I'm already penciling them in to make the finals. I don't care who they add in the East. I don't care if Durant plays for Miami. You still have to pick Cleveland based on LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, who were the 2 best players in the finals, and everybody else is an also-ran. So I think LeBron is smart. He'll go to a second straight finals. He'll have a chance to repeat, which he did in Miami. That's very hard to do. But when you're playing in the East, guys, there aren't a lot of stars here, not a lot of superstars. Last year we saw in the playoffs, it was LeBron and Kyrie and the guys in Toronto, Lowry and DeRozan. They didn't pass the test at all, even though they took them to 6 games. And after that, I mean, the East is just devoid of any kind of stars like they have out West.
So does that help an Eastern Conference team then to land Durant?
Well, that's the argument. You try to sell Durant on that you're banging your head against the wall out West. You don't have to face Golden State. You don't have to face the Spurs. And who knows, maybe the Clippers will get their act together one time. And so that would be, I'm sure that's going to be one of Pat Riley's deals, one of his things. I'm sure Boston would say that too. But these teams also, the problem is that Durant will go there as the number 1 player. Then who's your second best player? Miami, Dwayne Wade, he had a good year last year, very strong year, but he's really of an age now where you don't think, I mean, he's not going to be a number 2 star. And the guy, in Boston, it's Isaiah Thomas who's not a number 2 star. So I think Durant, from his situation, he's probably looking at it saying, I can stay in Oklahoma City. At least I play with Russell Westbrook, and they helped his team out with that draft night trade. They got Victor Oladipo out of Orlando, and, he's going to fit right into the lineup. So there's no Eastern team that's like a major piece away. The Knicks think they are. They're not going to get a meeting with Kevin Durant, doesn't look like. And even if they do, I don't think they're serious because, Derrick Rose has a lot to prove in terms of staying healthy, in terms of, he's been a ball-dominant, me-first point guard forever, not a great shooter, and now all of a sudden he's going to pass the ball to Carmelo. I want to see how that works.
We're talking with a longtime NBA columnist. Now he's a host on Sirius XM, NBA Radio, The Sporting News, Forbes.com, Mitch Lawrence. Give me the reaction in New York, Mitch, on the Rose trade. It seems it's a little mixed around the league. What do the people in New York think about Rose going there? As you mentioned, is that a help to get free agents? Is that a hurt to get free agents?
Well, let's start off with Derrick Rose himself. I think, when you look at it, they didn't give up a lot to get him. They gave up a backup guard in Grant. They gave up a guy with a poison contract in Calderon, and then Robin Lopez is a below-average center. That's how desperate the Bulls were, in terms of getting that package for Derrick Rose, who's in the last year of his deal. Now, it's a point guard league, and the Knicks finally got themselves a point guard. Now, I don't know if Derrick Rose is going to stay healthy. He claims he is. He claims he's going to be great again. But last year, second half he picked it up, but here's a guy who still struggles with the shooting. He has not been, since with all these knee injuries, guys, he is not the same fearless driver he used to be, doesn't finish as well. His defense is atrocious. He's one of the worst when it comes to that. He's obviously got to have a big year to get that next contract, and believe me, having covered the Knicks here a long time, since the early 90s basically, their management is into, and ownership is into, making a splash, into getting the big names to sell tickets. And if Derrick Rose has any kind of a semblance of a decent year where he stays upright and doesn't get injured, he will get big money from the Knicks. They'll want to keep him because they're all about big names. They're all about keeping Carmelo Anthony. They're all about, Derrick Rose. So this fits in with the game plan. They want to sell tickets more and they want to win.
So are they a dark horse, Mitch, though? I mean, Carmelo Anthony trying to recruit. Are they a dark horse in your mind for the? Now he said they're not even going to take the Knicks call, but does that close the door for you?
They still might get a meeting. But I don't think Kevin Durant looks at it and says, if I come to New York, we're going to win the title, or we're going to be better in Cleveland. I think he's got reservations, and it starts with, the two main players. First of all, Carmelo has been kind of on the downside with injuries, et cetera, the last couple of years. He's starting to slow down. He's still a me-first type of guy. He wants to shoot more. You bring in a Derrick Rose, and we all know what his MO is. He loves to control and dominate the ball. They have a new coach in Jeff Hornacek. I think Durant would probably look at that and say, well, this guy's never coached these guys. I don't know if he's there's no deal where you can look at it and say, yeah, this works with a Hornacek. Hornacek is a good guy. We've known him a long time as a player. Now, except for a couple of years in Philly as a player, he spent most of his career in Salt Lake City and Phoenix. And in those places, it is not New York. And so this is going to be a tough time for him in terms of ruling that locker room with a couple of strong personalities in Anthony and Rose, and then dealing with the media and the scrutiny, a team that hasn't won anything since 1973 championship-wise and has only, gotten out of the first round once since like 2000. So I don't know how Hornacek's going to do. And there are questions about Phil Jackson, too. Is he in it for the long run? We'll see. I think there's so many questions for Kevin Durant, even if he were to take a meeting with New York, and even if he were to get all the positives from them in a meeting, I'm sure he would probably look at it and say, it's too much of a gamble, too much of a risk for me. I got a better thing at home with Oklahoma City. I got a better thing with Golden State. I even got a better thing maybe with San Antonio because they have a proven track record of, with Greg Popovich there and their owner and their GM, R.C. Buford, they know how to build winners. Knicks haven't proved that to anybody.
Mitch Lawrence with us, NBA free agency. And, all right, let me get your thoughts on DeRozan. He's an interesting guy to me because of being in Toronto. I think, a lot of guys like to stay in Toronto when they have the chance to get out of there, but he seems like he likes it up there. Obviously, Colangelo with the Sixers, there's a little bit of a history there. The Lakers could get involved. Is DeRozan another guy on that list? Is he on the upper echelon of that list?
Well, he's not an upper echelon free agent. I think the Lakers really, the talk started really around the new year that DeRozan was going to head out there. He's an L.A. guy from Compton. He played at USC. The Lakers, obviously, with Bryant retiring, Kobe Bryant, they need a veteran. I'm not saying he's Kobe Bryant, but they need a veteran. They can't keep, they're bringing in Brandon Ingram, who's 18, 19 years old, to add to D'Angelo Russell and Julius Randle. And you got to start bringing in guys who have some success in the playoffs, who are experienced. Now, DeRozan this year, finally, with Kyle Lowry, they got to the conference finals. It was as you saw, it was not easy. It was a tough go. And, DeRozan's a nice player, but, I don't know if he's a number 2 star. He looks to me like a 3rd star on a really good team. And that's just not, for some teams that's okay, but I don't know really who has a lot of interest in him. He's not a top-tier free agent. If he's not scoring, he doesn't do a lot on the floor. And I think what helps Toronto, guys, in this situation, you brought up a great point. They have lost some great players over the years. We all know that Tracy McGrady years ago, he left as a free agent. Of course, Chris Bosh. Those things are not easily recoverable. You don't recover them from those easily as a franchise. What helped them here is they went deep in the playoffs. They've never been in the conference finals. Talking to their GM, Masai Ujiri, during the season in the playoffs, it was all about, they want to give him max dollars. They're going to give him the most money, but they know they have to prove to him that they got a winner on their hands and they can go deep in the playoffs. Now, at least they did that. At least they got to the conference finals, so that's good. That could help them keep DeRozan in the fold. My only question is, they really need to add a big-time power forward to that team. They tried to get Ibaka in a deal. They couldn't do that. But, DeRozan, if he leaves, unless he somehow gets to Golden State or San Antonio, maybe he'll just stay in the East and try to see what Toronto can do. But we all know they're a distant second to Cleveland.
Sure are. Mitch Lawrence with us, NBA columnist, Forbes, Sporting News, NBA Radio, Sirius XM. All right, Drummond and Whiteside, these are 2 big-time free agents, but that position, all right, they're centers. Are we still valuing that position in the league?
Well, first of all, Whiteside's getting a tremendous amount of attention, as he should. The Mavericks are after him. They say the Lakers are going to make a big push. Pat Riley has called him our number 1 priority. I myself am scared off by a 27-year-old guy who's like 15 years old. He's big-time lack of maturity. His teammates look at him like, why don't you grow up, act like a pro. My big problem with, when people talk about game changers at centers these days, there are no Bill Russells around. These guys who are big-time rebounders and shot blockers, I didn't see, he didn't do a whole lot in the playoffs in big spots for me. When Miami lost in the second round at Toronto. Remember a few years ago when Oklahoma City had to make a big decision whether it was going to be keeping James Harden with Durant and Westbrook or going for their best big, who was Ibaka, because he was supposedly going to change playoff games with his rebounding and shot blocking. Those guys are more easily replaceable than James Harden. That's the big lesson to be learned there. So I wouldn't touch Whiteside. Drummond's a different story. He's got more skills. He is a poor free throw shooter. We know that. He's just really starting to, the knock on him for years was that how interested was he in basketball. So you got to be careful with guys like that. These guys are going to be making $20 million plus per year. Do you want to invest in guys like this who really don't have the maturity, the mindset to be big-time players? I'd avoid them at all costs. Especially the way the game's going now. You may need a rim protector, but it's not required.
Yeah, and Horford also another big guy. Is he a little different from those guys in your opinion?
Well, much more professional, much more guy who everybody loves for his professionalism. Now he's undersized kind of as a center. He's more of a power forward. He doesn't produce great things in the playoffs. We've seen that. That's been one of Atlanta's problems here the last couple of years is he's an all-star, and they've had Millsap and Teague and name it on and on, Korver. These guys don't step up in the playoffs, so he'd be a great addition if he's like your third guy. If he could go, like the Spurs are interested in him. I think Golden State is interested in him. He'd be a real good fit there. If you're bringing him in as the number 1 or 2 guy, he is not that type of player. He just doesn't have that type of skill set. He doesn't have the game. And but no, don't get me wrong. He's a real big-time pro. He's been the heart and soul of that Atlanta team for a while, and everybody loves him. I think he'd be high on a lot of teams' lists.
Mitch Lawrence is with us, NBA free agency. We're taking a preview of some of the bigger names out there. Mike Conley's out there. Nick Batum's out there. Also some older veterans like Dirk Nowitzki, Pau Gasol. We know that Tim Duncan, Dwight Howard. Which guy on that second tier is the most interesting guy to watch if you're not one of those big-name guys? You got a lot of big names who maybe don't play the same game they did a couple of years ago.
Well, I wrote it for Sporting News last week, got a lot of attention that, Joakim Noah, who's a pretty big name, a guy who was the leader in Chicago for a few years in the Thibodeau regime, he is going to get a lot of interest. As a matter of fact, there is even a suspicion that Washington might end up giving him a max contract. They're denying it, but we'll see what shakes out. There could be a big bidding war for him if his knees are okay, because people love his intensity, his ferociousness. Here's a guy who's a real big-time leader in the locker room and on the court. And, he finished under Thibodeau. He finished, I think, one year he finished fourth in the MVP voting, which is pretty amazing considering he doesn't have a lot of offense. But everybody loves his mindset and his approach to the game. New York loves him. Washington loves him. Thibodeau would love to have him in Minnesota. Jason Kidd has already soured on Greg Monroe, who was their big free agent signing last summer from Milwaukee. He'd love to have him. When you have four teams like that, now Chicago, he's not going back to Chicago. But when you have four teams like that who are all interested in your services, that's where the money is going to start getting ridiculous. So I keep an eye on him. You mentioned Dwight Howard. Look, there are still character issues about Dwight Howard. Here's a guy who's very immature. We still know. He used to be a dominant player. He hasn't dominated like he once did. You got to be very careful. Giving up a lot of money for him. You mentioned Nowitzki. I think he's staying in Dallas. I think Mike Conley Jr. is a guy that Mavericks and Mark Cuban want to bring in. They need a point guard desperately. Memphis is a very, it's no longer an attractive place, I don't think, for Mike Conley. I think at one point this year he was looking at it as, he'll stay. But they got to really rebuild. They have a new coach in Dave Fizdale, Miami assistant. I think Conley might be on his way out of there. The Spurs also like Conley because Tony Parker's slowing down. So Conley's in a situation not unlike Noah, where there could be some big-time teams with some money looking for him, and that could drive up the price. And we'll see what happens. But there are a lot of good big names coming out this year.
Mitch Lawrence with us. Let me ask you this. Is Philly a player in free agency this year, in your opinion? Are they ready to make a splash? Maybe not one of the top-tier guys, but do they get involved with a name that would surprise people?
Well, you mentioned DeRozan before, and that's a Colangelo draft pick, I believe, in Toronto,
Yep.
and he likes him quite a bit. I just don't think at this stage of the game it's real too early. They're in the beginning of the Colangelo rebuilding era. They went through the Hinkie thing, and it's basically at ground zero. So I think in terms of a splash for a big-time player, no. I think they could add some other players down the line, second-tier players. Who those are, I'm really not sure. They had a great night, obviously, getting Ben Simmons. He's the key to their future right off the bat. They need so much more, though. They need a lot of players who can shoot. They obviously, guys, they've got a lot of unresolved stuff with Embiid and Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor. A lot of redundancy there in terms of bigs. I don't know. I don't know what to expect from Brian. He's always been aggressive in free agency, but he's been in situations before in Phoenix and Toronto where he was a lot more advanced in terms of winning than he is now. So I think he's probably going to have to wait a summer and see how things shake out. But I think he'll probably try to make some calls to some big-timers just in terms of, letting people know this is who we are in Philadelphia. This is our game plan.
Yeah. Got some good news on Embiid, though. Brett Brown joined me on Friday. He said if the Sixers would let him, Embiid is ready to play in the Summer League. I thought that was a pretty good sign, right? I mean, the fact that they're at least admitting that.
Yes. Well, we got to see him play. He hasn't played.
Yeah.
Who knows what he can do?
Would you want to play him? Would you want to see him? If you're the Sixers, do you let him play in the Summer League?
Oh, yeah, I got to get him out there. I have to see what he has. Even if he breaks a foot, I got to get him out on the court. Absolutely. I mean, enough is enough. I just can't wait for training camp, and I hope it's a go. I hope for their sake it's a go. I hope he plays, and I hope he shows what he did. He had some moments at Kansas where he looked like a number 1, number 2, number 3 overall pick. So let's see where he is. I think it's great. I think it's great if it could happen. Why if he's healthy, he's not going to play, I have no idea.
Mitch Lawrence, longtime NBA columnist. He's over at Mitch_Lawrence, Forbes.com, and Sporting News, Sirius XM, NBA Radio. Mitch, always good to catch up.
Guys, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.